And we begin tonight with damning new video from a former Trump cabinet member and key Project 2025 architect, Russell Vought, who confirms what we all know, that Donald Trump has personally had talks with Vought about his work behind Project 2025, and Trump gave him his blessing.
It's interesting. He's in fact not even opposing himself to a particular policy. Yeah. He's been at our organization. He's raised money for our organization. He's blessed it from the, I remember walking into our last day in office and told him what I was going to do. So he's very supportive of what we do.
This new audio comes from two investigative reporters with the nonprofit Center for Climate Reporting, who secretly recorded a nearly 2-hour conversation with Vought, who thought he was meeting with some high-dollar donors, which in and of itself is problematic in what it implies about the potential selling of access to an American administration. And while Vought currently runs his own think tank, he previously served as the policy director for the Republican National Convention Committee and recently helped to rewrite the official party platform. And he's been a huge Project 2025 promoter. Publicly, Trump will tell anyone who listens that he has no idea what this thing is.
I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Those denials seem real dishonest, given what Vought told those two reporters, and given the fact that nearly 140 individuals who worked in the Trump administration are affiliated with Project 2025. But here's what's really concerning. The Trump conservatives have a secret plan that they've intentionally been hiding. The reporters with the Center for Climate Reporting also spoke with another Project 2025 author and Vought aide, who admitted that there is a secretive second phase of Project 2025 that is supervised by Vought. Apparently, the Heritage Foundation has a giant policy packet filled with executive orders and agenda items that will be handed to Trump administration officials on day one.
Yeah, the goal is, familiarize all the transition team people with these plans. Yeah. But you don't actually send them to their work emails, because then, right. Then they blow up.
Politico has reported that Vought is in close contact with Trump, speaking with him once a month. And according to Vought himself, he also speaks with the campaign. Vought also has been mentioned as a possible chief of staff in a second Trump administration. If Trump wins in November, what Vought and Project 2025 fanatics have in store is the complete upending of American society. Here he is explaining what his think tank, the Center for Renewing America, which alongside the Heritage Foundation has been at the heart of Project 2025, promotes.
An organization that I helped turn into the Death Star that is accomplishing all the debates that you are reading about. I think you have to rehabilitate Christian nationalism. You have the largest deportation in history, block funding for Planned Parenthood. I want to be the person that crushes the deep state.
When asked what would happen if people took to the streets in protest, he told the reporters that Trump would deploy the military to silence the unrest. Think about that for a second. These are the core philosophies of the MAGA Republican Party, and it should come as no surprise that J.D. Vance was embraced by Vought, given that he shares the same beliefs.
So I am very happy with the JD pick. I think it's transformative for sure. And he's, think of him as a member version of what we do. Yeah. So there's no think tank, no policy organization, no battle plan creator other than us for the worldview that I think Donald Trump has and that JD has.
Joining me now is David Jolly, MSNBC political analyst and former Republican congressman who's no longer affiliated with the party, and Angelo Carusone, president and CEO of Media Matters. Angelo, I do want to start with you. That second clip, this is the aide to Mr. Vought. He said that they have a second set of policy proposals and instructions that they would give to members of a second Trump administration, but not email it to them. And he said the reason for that is that if you emailed it to their official emails, one could file a FOIA. The media and people like you, sir, could potentially file Freedom of Information Act requests and get copies of those instructions. That, to me, is one of the most chilling things that I heard, that they've got these secret plans they want to keep away from the media. For you, what's the most chilling stuff that you heard?
The fact that he's already done something like this, but on a smaller scale. So in the first 6 months of 2021, more than 20 states had either legislation or executive orders that banned teaching critical race theory in schools. We went back and looked at those states that did that. The overwhelming majority of the states that implemented that work were directly based off of the model language, the model legislation, and the model executive orders that Russell Vought's new organization had drafted at the time. And so if you take what he did then and you apply that to the conversation he just had, and that's what we've been warning about, is that 900-page policy book was sort of just put everything on the table, all the ideas, all the things they wanted. But the 180-day agenda, the document that he referenced there, the thing that he is drafting as a part of this Project 2025 initiative, is sort of the bundle of things to implement, the executive orders, the directives at the various departments. It is the step-by-step plan for implementing all of the extremist, all of the authoritarian parts of Project 2025. And because he's already demonstrated the ability to do this at a small scale, and that they know they have to do this in the shadows, that, to your point, is extraordinarily chilling.
Yeah, and I mean, David, I think one of the points that we really want to try to make to people as they think about Project 2025 is that Project 2025 is the nationalization of policy ideas that are already being experimented on in red states. So there's already a Project 2025 operating in the state of Texas, where they've got few abortion rights, where women have fewer rights than men, where rape victims have almost no rights, where people who are having ectopic pregnancies have no rights, have to leave the state. States like Idaho, states like Iowa, states like Florida, states like Louisiana are already living under a version of this. They just want to nationalize the things that Ron DeSantis, for instance, is doing, taking over businesses, suing businesses who won't comply on speech issues, taking away critical race theory, taking away affirmative action, taking away DEI, and turning the state essentially into sort of white nationalist heaven or hell, depending on which side you're on. They're already doing it. They just want to do it on a national level.
They are. And I think it's easy to look at Project 2025 and sometimes say, oh, it's just a robust contract with America, this hard right conservative wonky agenda for every department and every agency in the federal government. And in some ways, it includes that. But I think what you heard in those tapes is the admission, and in his words, it is also to rehabilitate Christian nationalism.
Yes.
And if there's an ethos behind all of this, that is in some ways the most dangerous part of Project 2025, because that is the culture war part of this. You can have the wonky debates about no government, less government, big government. Certainly it matters and it impacts people, certainly marginalized communities. But this notion that Project 2025 under a Trump administration would rehabilitate Christian nationalism, you might as well put in the parenthetical white Christian nationalism, and you get the policies you just described, Joy, from book burning to taking away healthcare decisions from families, to telling teachers what they can teach and what they can't teach, to the war on migrant communities, communities of color, the disenfranchisement of people's vote and their own democracy. All of these things are an advancement of white Christian nationalism. And the one thing we know about Donald Trump is not only does he believe that, does he curry favor with that, but he sees that as a strategy for leading the country, but also for winning this election. That's the danger. And honestly, that should be the motivation to beat this back at the ballot box and finally quiet these forces in American politics.
Absolutely. I mean, Angelo, there's a part in this conversation he's having with these two people he thinks are donors where he talks about their massive deportation plan. And he says, we're going to do mass deportation. And then he goes from that to saying mass deportation will help us get rid of multiculturalism. We'll just deport all of these brown people, then we'll get rid of multiculturalism. And then he goes directly from there to the thing that David just said. He says, we then need to reintroduce and sort of, change the vision of Christian. He first says nationism, and then he says nationalism, and he says Christian nationalism. So there's a direct through line in their mind to making America whiter, to taking away women's reproductive rights, to force women that are here already to have children, and getting rid of multiculturalism, and then adding Christian nationalism. To them, they're all one policy.
It is one policy, and that's right. And if you look at the work that he's done, I mean, he's written about this publicly, he's talked about this publicly, he's been a big advocate for Christian nationalism. And then beyond that, you know, when you get into the mass deportation side of it, the flip side of that is when you start to look into some of the stuff he's written, some of the stuff in Project 2025, some of the stuff in the Center for Renewing America, you find out that they want to then change the way immigration is done to essentially privilege Christian immigrants, so that they would make that one of the key factors for getting into the country, for allowing for immigration. So on the one hand, they're pushing out and they're getting rid of multiculturalism. On the other hand, then they're flooding the zone with sort of white Christians. And that's the flip side of all of this, is that they have a plan on both ends of this. And one of the things that disturbs me is that when you think about the Supreme Court decision that just came out that granted immunity to presidents, it actually reduces and gets rid of some of the friction in the system that made it hard, that would have made it harder for them, at least a little bit, to implement some of the extremist policies they need in order to execute this, which is actually using the military to both quell and suppress any protests, and also simultaneously to execute and implement a lot of the deportations that he's talking about. So a lot of these things became a lot more possible and real in the last few months because of decisions that the Supreme Court has made.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making a unitary executive, which is a long-standing conservative theory that George W. Bush, for instance, used to execute, to implement incredible power, power from the presidency after 9/11. They believe that this president should have superpowers, and so does John Roberts.